glad you're here. I think you're really going to enjoy what it is that we have for you today. We have some great guests. And before we get started, I would love to introduce a special guest who's going to do our introductions, and that is the president of Buffalo State College, President Conway Turner.
It's just really great to see the room full here. I'm glad everybody came out on this beautiful day during our homecoming week to really see two really special guests that we have on campus. So, I often think at Buffalo State, it's always about having wonderful memories and hearing wonderful people and asking wonderful questions, and remember the day that you were here, that you saw these two great folks right here on our stage. So, without further ado, I'm really proud to introduce our two guests today. The first, of course, is no stranger to Buffalo or to Buffalo State. Tom Fontana is an alum of Buffalo State and has written and produced great, groundbreaking television series. Things that I know many of you know, like Sing Elsewhere, Homicide, Life of the Street, Oz, City on the Hill, and the next Netflix Borgia. Fontana wrote the HBO film Strip Search, directed by Sidney Lumet, as well as contributed to two pieces in the September 11th special America, A Tribute to Heroes. He is currently filming a new series, Monsieur Spade, in the south of France, and he won't take me along, I don't know why not. He's received many awards, including 3 Emmy Awards, 4 Peabody Awards, 3 Writers Guild Awards, 4 Television Critics Association Awards, the Cable Ace Award, the Humanitas Prize, a Special Edgar, and the first prize of the Geneva Cinema Tout Festival. In addition to his international accolades, locally Tom continues to support and mentor our Buffalo State students. He founded the Tom Fontana Sagan Lewis TFA Award in Buffalo State, which supports television and film arts students to do internships in New York City, Los Angeles, and other major cities. So we're very excited. And along with Tom, Mark Ryder is accompanying him today, a phenomenal screen actor. Mark starred in the Netflix series Borgia as Cesare Borgia. This series, created by Tom Fontana, ran for 3 seasons. Mark currently plays Father Doyle in the Showtime City on the Hill, now in his 3rd season. In addition to his acting career, Mark also is a screenwriter and is developing a number of different projects for film and television. So we are so excited to have them both with us today. So come on down.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you so much, Dr. Conway Turner, for the great introduction of these two. I'm so glad you guys are here. This is the first time, Tom, that you've actually been on campus to talk since I've been here, which is 7 years. So I'm so glad to have you here on campus.
So like a plague of locusts.
Yes. And Mark, I'm so excited that Tom told me years ago. You may not remember this. You said, "Listen, if I ever come out," you actually told me, "I will bring an actor with me so that we will have someone to discuss that process with our theater students and with people that are interested in that process." Today is going to be all about character development from script to screen. So I have a lot of questions for Tom and Mark. We're going to talk for a little bit, and then afterwards I'm going to open it up to you to ask questions. So think of great questions, anything that you want to ask, and we'll have a great time with you asking questions to these two in just a little while. So my first question is really broad, and it's for you. Where do your characters come from?
Hell. Well, I'd have to divide that in 2 because with a show like Borgia, it's obviously based on characters, human beings who really existed. So that is something that entails a lot of research to find out as much as you can about those characters. With a show like Homicide, even though it was based on David Simon's book, which is a brilliant nonfiction book called Homicide, A Year on the Killing Streets, we fictionalized the entire thing though using pieces of it. I think the most important thing for me is to understand that each of us is going through our life experience, and we are gaining and losing knowledge as we go. And so to track that evolution or devolution of each character is where I start. Like in the first season of, say, Borgia, where did I want Cesare Borgia to start, and by the end of the first season, where did I want him to get to, without hello? I hope it's my agent. No, you know what I mean. That so that you say, okay, this is the journey of this season, but there's going to be more. So.
And this was not a planned question, but when you map that beginning and ending, do you ever have things that happen in the season that cause changes to what you had mapped out from the beginning, or do you usually?
No, absolutely. I think, if you're smart enough to hire people who are talented, you have to trust them. If they bring something to a character that you hadn't expected, I think it's important to go with that, because you're going to get more out of that actor, and therefore more of a fully developed character than saying, no, this is what I had in my head. A lot of writers I know write with specific actors in mind. I don't do that unless I want to hire a specific actor that I know I'm going to hire. But I think you get into trouble if you think, oh, this would be a great movie for Jennifer Lawrence. And the chances of getting Jennifer Lawrence are minimal.
Right.
So these other actors come in to audition, and all you're doing is going, well, she's no Jennifer Lawrence. And so you find yourself getting frustrated in the process of it.
So speaking of your hires, one of your great hires is here today, Mark. And Mark, what I'd like to do is talk a little bit about when you first get a role. And you're welcome to relate this specifically if you want to Cesare or to Father Doyle, but when you first get a role, what is your process for developing and getting to know your character? What is your process for becoming that character?
Well, honestly, it just varies every time. Like, there's no one way to skin a cat, or whatever that expression is. But like, with Cesare, he's obviously a real guy from history. And like, I remember at the time, people would ask me, like, what books have you read and what research? Like, honestly, I started with Wikipedia. You know what I mean? You start somewhere like there, and you're like, okay, what is this period? And then you find like maybe one or two books or something about the period that you can inhale, but I think any actor that says they've read like 10 books or something about it is lying. But I mean, obviously you're going to start with the script, and then you're gonna see, and then from the next point for me would be like, where do I meet this character? Like, where are the similarities? Like, you just delve deeper and deeper and deeper. But I always try and make sure it's like related back to me, and personal to me, rather than, creating some crazy stuff that like, then that feels like performing to me. But the more that I can see myself in a character, then I think that's when it starts to come alive for me.
Can I be nosy and go even more specific? When
Yeah.
you say related back to me, can you kind of give maybe even more specifics about that, or an example, or just what do you mean by relating it back to you?
Well, it's like Father Doyle's in City on a Hill, which we just did with Tom. He's a priest, so it's all about faith. And then I asked myself my own questions of like, what are my struggles with faith? What's my experience there? Even if I don't have like, say, a particular like absolute conflict that's the exact same as him, it's like, but what in me is similar? Like, right or wrong, or morality, or what's that character struggling with that I can find my own struggles, and then something like that.
Yeah, that's great. And Mark talks about maybe one book instead of 10 books. On your side, as developing these in the writing room, or even before you get to the writing room, what is the intersection of research and imagination when you're creating?
Well, again, to use Borgia as an example, I read like 30 books. Some were even in Latin, which I remember saying to a Jesuit priest when I went to Canisius High School, when will I ever use Latin? And I'm sure from the grave he's laughing at me for asking that question. But in any case, what I found with the Borgia family was that there was a historical fact, then a gap, then a historical fact, then a gap. And where, let's say, Cesare was here and here and here, he shifted. And so my job of my imagination was to fill in, knowing the period, knowing the world that he lived in, what would happen between here and here that I could make up that would get the character here. I'll give you two examples of, that have nothing to do with the question. But one is that I was searching for some piece of information and going through books, and I couldn't find what I wanted, but I found a reference to the fact that Cesare went hunting with panthers. And I went, well, come on. So I went to our line producer and I said, can I have panthers? And he said, well, because we were shooting in Europe, he said, let me see what I could do. And he delivered one panther. Mark had to act with a panther. But I just thought, now that's something I would never have invented. And I wouldn't have found if I wasn't digging through all this stuff to find it. The other thing that happened was I found two letters, one from the ambassador to the Vatican from the Duke of Milan, and one from the ambassador to the Vatican from the King of France. And they were both describing the same event at the Vatican with the Borgia family. Completely different points of view. Because the Duke of Milan hated the Pope, so his ambassador was going, yeah, they're terrible people. And the King of France loved the Pope, so he was going, it was a fabulous evening, right? So I thought, well, I don't know which of them is lying, so I'm just going to find a middle place here to write this scene, and it'll be my imagination, but it'll be as close to whatever the reality was that I could come up with.
Did you feel you ended in the middle of the two? I mean, or do you?
I think I probably leaned toward the King of France, but
that's great. This question is for both of you, and it's from two different sides. So here we have a lot of writers, we have a lot of actors, right? We have people from TFA and from theater, and I'm curious at the very beginning, you've written your pilot, you've done that. It's time for casting. I'm curious if you could take us through. As writer, if you could take us through the casting process from your perspective, and then if you could take us through the audition process, the side, like how do you develop that character for your audition and for your side? So maybe from either side.
Well, I'll tell you this: the hardest part about casting for me is hearing the same scene that I've written 100 times, because it only gets worse. And it is true that you learn a lot in auditions about the writing, because if 5 actors have a problem with the same beat in a scene, then the problem isn't the actor, the problem is the scene. So you do learn a lot, but it is painful to sit there. And for those of you who are actors, you have to understand that those of us on the other side of the table, as terrifying as we may seem, we just want you to be brilliant so we can go home. Okay? We do not want to look at the next 50 people coming in. We want to go, that's our Cesare Borgia. You know what I mean? So that's my perspective of the casting process.
I mean, I find the casting process incredibly painful, as I imagine most actors do. It's just a case of, honestly, like, you've got 2 days, don't you? So what can you do? And I feel like I just try to do as much work as I possibly can. and I'm as prepared as I can be to walk in that room, and that means learning the lines and connecting to the character and
Also doing the accent, because a lot of the parts are not Belfast.
yeah. So by the time like you're devoting like 5 hours to the accent, 3 hours to the script analysis, and then get it on its feet as much as you can, and then you go in there. But I mean, auditioning still remains a mystery to me, and I've been doing it for like 14 years. You just don't. I don't know what they want. So you go in and you literally give it your best shot and see what happens. Like, I'd say like the getting excited about it somewhat is what I find. Like, I think it's very easy to be like, oh, the writing's like not good enough, or like I don't have enough. Or like, oh, I'm not really feeling it, I'm feeling tight. Like, I think it's easy to make a million excuses, but if you can find like, no, let me find like some way that I can like pour myself into this and make this enjoyable. And there's actually an actor, Jelko, what's his last name?
Jelko Ivanic.
Really great like stage and screen actor, and he says like, some of the happiest moments of my life are walking out of auditions, because it's like, the relief of that process. It's a difficult process. I really think it's I speak to a lot of actors, and I think we all struggle to really feel comfortable and confident in that environment.
Tell the story about when you got the call that you got the part on Borgia.
And this is going to be my next question. So I want you to tell this whole story. I was going to ask, do you remember the casting process with
Oh yeah.
So I want to hear from both of you.
Well, Oliver Hirschspiegel, who is a German director, he directed the first 4 episodes of Borgia, and and so we were seeing lots of people, and he and Mark had worked together on what was the movie?
5 Minutes of Heaven.
5 Minutes of Heaven, and he said to me as people would come in and we'd be like, no, he's not right. Oliver kept saying, don't worry, I got the guy. So when he came in, Oliver had already decided he was going to get the part, but Oliver had built the expectations so high for me, because I'd never seen him before, that I'm like, oh, okay, and I mean, and I thought he was absolutely right for the part, but it was, what I'm saying is, the perception of the people you're auditioning for was completely different, because Oliver was totally wanted you to get the part, and I had never even heard of you. So.
Do you remember prepping that role or that audition at all?
Yeah, we did. I remember having 3 auditions for it.
What choices do you make when you're auditioning? You don't really know this character. Tell me what you get. Tell us what you get for your audition. Like, what materials do you get, and how do you prep?
I think it was two scenes. I probably still remember some of the lines.
It's because they were so well written.
So yeah, by the time the third round was in the room with Tom and the director and the casting director, and I remember just that day I'd done it. I did it with the guy outside. I did it with my mate in the morning. I did it with my friend on the phone. Like, I'd heard. I was ready. I was just ready to go in there, and then, that's all. I don't remember you in the room, honestly. shots fired, but I really.
Why did I bring him?
Well, tell us about.
I don't remember you in the room either.
Well, tell us about when you got the call. What's the story there?
What is this? Is there a story?
You had a job at some.
Oh yeah, I was working in a vet as a receptionist in a veterinary clinic, and I was on my lunch break, and yeah, I remember getting a call, and they were like, "You got this part, and this is the amount of money you're going to get," and all this stuff. I was 20 years old, and then I was like, "Can I have a second, please?" And just put the phone down. And I was like.
then he killed 2 cats.
No, then I just went back and did my afternoon shift in the vets, just being like buzzing the whole day.
And you kind of had your breakout, became more known from 5 Minutes of Heaven, where you played a young Liam Neeson, right? And you were in Robin Hood, right? And now you're doing a lot more television. Can you talk about the difference between going from film to television and what you enjoy about keeping a character for an extended period of time?
I think honestly, personally, like my dream, like the ideal is to be on a really great show that spans like 5 seasons or whatever, with a great writer like Tom, who's giving you something where a character is evolving and moving, and you get time to go like so deep into it. Like the film process, it's short, you know, unless you're doing some huge blockbuster or whatever. It's like it's quick, so that's nice in itself. But there's something about, you know, evolving with a character over a long period of time that is really enjoyable. And I mean, with Tom, for example, like he doesn't tell you where it's going. Like he'll give you like 1 or 2 nuggets or something, so you're just waiting for the scripts to come out for you then to be, you know, see what you have next. But I think that challenge is the most rewarding of starting one place with a character and really over what, hours and hours and hours of screen time to take him on a ride.
And as a writer, I mean, that has to be, I know that television is your medium, right?
Yes.
And maybe one of the reasons you love it so much is because you do get to invest so much in the characters that you create. And I'm curious, you kind of touched on this, but as you write, and you know, you said you kind of planned the first and last episode, right, where it's going of the season. But do characters sometimes evolve in a different way than you even expect them to as you're writing them? And if so, can you give an example?
Well, absolutely. Because again, once you hire the actor, you have to go with the actor. And not that the actor says, oh, I want to take the character this way, as we were talking about earlier. When you start doing a series, I know everything about the character and the actor knows nothing about the character. And then over the course of time, the actor knows everything about the character and I know nothing about the character. And I'll often go to the actor, and you know, we're talking maybe 3-4 seasons in, and go, do you think she would do this? But in terms of when I was doing St. Elsewhere, we had a part, like 5 little parts of like a resident. It was like resident number 1, resident number 2, resident number 3, resident number 4. We were going to hire 4 different actors to just do those, each one. And it was like 2 lines, 5 lines, you know. And instead we hired Ed Begley Jr. and gave him all the lines. And he and William Daniels, who played Dr. Craig, who was the heart surgeon, the terrifying heart surgeon, they had a chemistry that was so funny and so wonderfully tense, and that we started expanding Ed Begley's part, so that we could every week see this duel between the 2 characters, and it became like part of the show that we never would anticipated doing with the first script or 2.
And going forward from that, like looking from Oz to Borgia to St. Elsewhere, or sorry, not St. Elsewhere, to City on a Hill, you write some nasty characters, right? Even your good guys are bad guys. So can you talk a little bit about all that depth that your characters have and the flaws that they have, and why you write them that way, and what that adds to a story for continued success?
Well, I think I don't see the world as good guys, bad guys. I see human beings who are equally confused and dark and brilliant and all the things that make up each of us. And as we were talking about earlier, there is no bad guy who thinks of himself as a bad guy. He can justify it. Now, when I was doing Oz, there were a lot of characters that were not role models for humanity. And one was Vern Schillinger, who was the head of the Aryans, and probably was the worst character in the show, if that was possible on Oz to have the worst character. And it was a struggle for me to find the place that I could that I could write him from to balance him in some way without justifying him in any way. It's very tricky writing. And where I found it was with his two sons, that he was a man who cared about his two sons, who were, if you'll pardon my language, as fucked up as he was. And that, though, was a way for me to get to his heart. And it didn't change the bad behavior except in relation to his sons, even though in his relationship with his sons, he was pretty bad to them as well, but you knew it was coming out of a really odd, perverse, loving place, if that makes any sense at all.
It totally does. And you know, one of those characters also was Cesare, right? Not always the good guy, right? And a lot of our students watched the season finale of the season finale of season 1, and we see a lot. I mean, it's a roller coaster for your character in that episode. And I don't know how much you remember of the season finale of season 1, but could you talk a little bit about playing a character that is a human being, that has so many sides, and there is no that character is not a right or a wrong. It's a human character. How do you play that, and how do you switch from one side to the other? How do you go through the emotions? It was such an emotional. I rewatched that episode 2 days ago after in preparation. I mean, it's a lot. It is a lot of. Your character goes through pretty much everything in one episode. So can you talk a little bit about that process of emotional roles?
Yeah, I don't really know how to answer. I mean, Cesare was a real man of extremes, so I sort of felt like every direction he'd go in, there's such an intensity every way. But it's the same thing as Paul was saying. It's like there's a scene in the 3rd season of Borgia where Cesare literally massacres an entire town and all the children and women, like everyone in the town. And I remember that was like the one moment of that character. I was just like, how can I justify doing that? But then it was sort of like, no, he had to do it. Like his overall vision is good. Like he believes that if he conquers Italy, like he can enrich the lives of the people. So I have to destroy this town. And I have to send out a message that's so brutal. So yeah, it's every time with that character, I'd come to the conclusion that he did the thing that he felt he had to do at the time. And then also, human beings are impulsive. We're sometimes ruled by our emotions. Cesare, I think in that episode, he stabs a guy in the back, doesn't he? He's lost. So I understand him getting lost in this intensity. He's just that sort of human being. So I mean, those sort of characters, he wanted to conquer the world. When you're someone that wants to conquer the world, then you have to be a very extreme person. And then I tap into my sense of myself of I want to be great. We all want to be great in some way, or we have that version of it. So can I take that to the extreme? Where would that lead me if I was in that position? I had an army with me. What would I do? So you can kind of find your way to justify anything.
Let's go behind the scenes. Let's use City on Hill. And for those here that have aspirations of being in that writer's room, writer's room one day, can you take us into the writer's room for this show? How many people are there? What is the process in that room? What's going on in that room?
Well, first of all, I am I may be the only showrunner who doesn't do a traditional writer's room. So I'm the worst one to ask about this. And I'll tell you why. It's because television can be written by committee. There's a lot of people who have a lot at stake, not just the writers and the actors and the director, but the studio and the network. And so there's a lot of opinions, and there's a lot of oh, you should do this, you should do that, you should do that. And what I found when you put a bunch of writers in a room, unless you set a tone, the correct tone, it becomes a competition. People I want Tom to think I'm the smartest person in the room. Well, I being not the smartest person in the room, of which I am not the smartest person in the room, I don't care if people are the smartest people in the room. I just want their best efforts. So what I've done over the years is I maybe have 1 day or 2 days where all the writers are in the room together. And then what we do is, and it's also different in the sense that I don't expect the writer's room to develop the Bible for the whole season. I develop the Bible, maybe with one other writer, and then I assign each episode to a specific writer. And so that then becomes, the relationship becomes between me and the other writer, the writer who's writing that specific episode. Because writing is such a personal, intimate, private, which is probably the same word 3 times. So if I was reading that in the speech, I would have edited it. But in any case, you can't sit in a room with a bunch of people and have them go through the script and say, "Oh, I don't think that works," and I don't, you know. You can give the other writers a draft of one of the writer's scripts and get their opinions, but I never tell the writer who. In other words, if I give drafts to the other writers and I get all their notes, I decide what notes I'm going to give the individual writer. It isn't a free-for-all of opinion about the script.
What's that note session like between you and the writer?
Well, you know, it's tricky because what I try to do is be very Socratic, if you will, and I ask questions about the intention of the writing and what the writer thinks the motivation of a character is. I think the worst kind of notes to give are well, I would do this because, well, the fact that I would do it doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way it should be done. It only means that that's the way I would do it. And so I'm not describing it particularly well, but it is about respecting, same thing with like actors. If you're going to hire people, respect them and nurture them as opposed to criticize them, you know. But it's tricky. I'm sounding like, you know, St. Paul the Apostle, but it's a tricky process, and again, it depends on the individual writer that I'm working with. But I want to try to get the best out of them. And in a way, it's selfish, because if I get the best out of them, I don't have to do the rewrite. Because ultimately, I have to get the script ready for production. I'm the final say and also the final responsible person. So if the script sucks, it's my fault. It's not the individual writer's fault.
So do they then write you a second draft and then you write a third draft? How does that?
What happens is the first draft I say, you know, teach me what I don't know about my show. Mm-hmm. And the second draft I say, now I'm going to teach you what I do know about my show. And then I do the third draft to get it ready for production.
Do you find that it's difficult having, even though I know you use pretty much one writer for each episode, each of those writers, I know your job is to put everything in the same voice, but each of those writers have to have drastically different voices. So is it a lot of work for you to put it into?
I mean, it gets easier as you're shooting and as the seasons go by, because the actors, you know, they're hearing the actors, so the voices are the real voices. So it's you know, beginning a series is always the toughest part. But it is my job to make sure each character sounds like each character. I always say it's like putting together a tapestry. Each writer gives me a piece of the tapestry, and then I sew it all together, and we hang it on the wall and say, "Wow, what a tapestry!"
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Mark. When you get a script, can you tell me what you think the difference is between a well-written role for you to act and a role that you don't want to act? What, for my writers and my actors, what does a good role look like? What does a good character look like?
I mean, on the most basic level, it's like, does this sound like actual speech? You know, like, does a human being speak like this? Do I believe this is a person? But I find like the best writing for me is the ones where you'll go back a second, third, fourth time, and it's just, things are just jumping out. I don't even know if that's a mystical, deep quality or some just great subtext work, but it's like, I read a play recently called Lion in the Streets. I don't even remember the name of the playwright, but like, every time I went back to it, I was just seeing more the kind of complexities of humanity. It's like, yeah, tapping into like our deeper motivations, our violence, our, I don't know, it all of a sudden just becomes this beautiful mess of that is being a human being, rather than someone that's just a hero or a villain. I think, yeah, that three-dimensional quality, I don't know how you write that. How do you write that? Like, do you know what I mean? I get the feeling of it. I can't quantify an example as to what that is, but I think we just feel it. It's just messiness.
Yeah, the messiness is the key, because what I always want is for the audience to be slightly confused. You have to create a character, and that character has to behave in the way that character behaves. But they also have to, as you said, be impulsive, where they surprise you, and they also have to be doubtful sometimes of their own intention. Because if you just have a character, in my mind, if you just have a character who is, you know, then just knows he's right and knows he's doing good or whatever, it's, you know, then it's a Marvel movie, you know?
I love that comment. Because I'm not a big fan. But how much of your visuals do you write in your scripts? How much do you write in your action or your?
I'm very sparse, because, you know, William Shakespeare's most longest piece of exposition is Exeunt chased by a bear. So my brother Paul here, did I get it right? Pursued by a bear. My brother Paul is a scholar in Shakespeare. So Exeunt pursued by a bear. That's the longest exposition in any of the Shakespeare plays, and I figure if that's enough for Shakespeare, it's enough for me. I am lucky in that, you know, I hire the directors, so I have an opportunity to talk through the scripts scene by scene with them. But I'm not a director. I never wanted to be a director, and I would rather hire a director who has a visual sense and a visual storytelling sense, and not impose too much upon them, though they have to stay within the style of the series. But you know, I just think it's important when you invite people to play in the playground, you let them bring their best game. You know.
Let's talk about directors a little bit more. How many episodes are this season of City on the Hill?
8.
8 episodes.
It's all a blur now.
Yeah. So 8 episodes. How many directors for?
Well, I like using a lot of directors. So the first season we had 8 directors, but with COVID, we ended up having one director do 2 episodes. So we had 4 directors for the second and third seasons.
So Mark, working with so many different directors as an actor, can you talk about what it's like to work with different styles, different directing styles, and just talk about that process of coming in for a new episode and having a different director each time?
Yeah, honestly, I think some directors you click with and others you don't. And I think we talk a lot as actors about actors, directors. So it's like, I feel there's directors that really understand our process. And then I've worked with directors who just really don't. And it almost surprises me the number that don't. Like, well, I'm being sort of disrespectful to them, but it's like, yeah, they focus maybe way more on the visual or something, and less on sort of getting the best performance out of us. So you're obviously just going to get a range of directors on a show. But I would say like having a new like fresh director each time is quite interesting from an acting point of view, because it's a new challenge, and I think it keeps it fresh. And I like having a different one each time, because they're always going to bring something different. Like some directors will just come up and just give you a word, and then you'll be like, "Ooh, that's interesting," and then it gets the performance that they need. And then other times they'll sit down and you really like, "What's this all about? Let's pick this," and that will work too. But both things are kind of a new, bring a new like aliveness to the process. So
I'm gonna ask you to get super specific. Brace yourself. A lot of our students have never had this experience, right? This is your life. Can you take us what it's like from when you get the script to an episode? How much rehearsal is there? What is the rehearsal process? What is your process with other actors as well? All the way to your first stage.
I mean, I like to rehearse, and I like to get that connection to another actor, but very often you'll turn up on set and this is like the love of your life for the last 15 years and you've just met them for the first time. So like, it's hard to make that believable then. Like, so I really do like as much rehearsal as possible, but other actors don't like that. They want to keep it like completely fresh. There's a director on City on a Hill and on Borgia. He did the first 2 episodes of season 3. He doesn't want any rehearsal. It's Christoph Schreebe, so he'll come in and he'll say like, "Here's where you were. This is what, when you walk in the door, that's what's behind you." And then you come in and then let's go. Let's take the first thing. Let's see what we get. And I think like Clint Eastwood is that example, isn't he? Just like get that. But I've worked with directors who've done like 75 takes, but somehow it works. Like take 73 to 75 are the perfect ones.
Do you sometimes bring multiple styles of delivery, and do you ask for multiple takes of different styles when you come in ever, or do you come in knowing what you're writing, what you want?
I feel like there's this balance between being underprepared and overprepared. And if I've learned the line so unbelievably well in a certain like structure, and I have such a strong idea of how I do it, I come in and I'm not flexible, and I can't veer from my idea. I can't. But so I want to have my prep, so I arrive and I know what I'm doing and I have what I want to bring. But then I'm also open to the director, the writer, like bringing me other things. The scene can take this completely different direction. And then then it's just about playing. Like sometimes you start the first take and it's completely wrong. Like, or not even wrong, but it's and then it takes a different turn in a different life. And I mean, it's honestly just boring if you're going to go in and you're going to do 6 takes in a row and you're going to deliver it exactly the same. There's no artistic fulfillment in any way. So I want to be alive and responding to the actor in front of me and the team around, and I want it to be this collaboration. Like that's what's the most thrilling part of this job, I think.
Because you also don't know what the set is going to look like sometimes. If you have something in your head and suddenly the door is way over there and you were like, "Oh no, I wanted to exit this way."
Mm-hmm.
You have to go with the environment you're in, and some actors have trouble with that.
You've done this for a long time. This is old.
Some people think
right?
too long.
I mean, like you've got these experiences from so many different great shows. But our writers, the first time, so our seniors write a television pilot, and they work the whole semester on a television pilot. They premiere it at the end of the semester, and it's always such an amazing experience for the writers to get to see what they've written for the first time, visually. And I guess I'm curious for you, when you have been working on these characters for so long, what is your process, one, on set? Tell me about what you like to be involved with and what you are involved with on set. You can use whichever show you prefer as an example. And then also, I guess the experience of seeing the people that you've cast portray these roles that you've written.
Yeah. Well, as the showrunner, I am involved in every single decision the set, the costumes, everything. So I know a lot before I get to the set of what to expect. But I've always said there are three kinds of actors. There is the actor who does a line I've written and does it poorly, and they suck. And then there's the actor who does the line exactly the way I heard it in my head, and I go, oh, he's a good actor. And then there's the actor who does the line in a way that I never anticipated and think to myself, I am a fucking great writer. and I think that's part of the thing. You have, like Mark was saying about, you can prepare yourself all you want, but until the community of artists come together to create whatever you're going to work on, you have to be willing to let go of a lot of things. One of the other things, because I'm the showrunner, I have the final edit on every episode, and one of the things that I've discovered very early on is I will write a monologue and kill myself on this monologue, and just every word I've worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and they shoot it, and I'm in the editing room, and one actor looks at the other actor in a certain way, just looks, and I go, oh, I don't need the monologue. And I cut the monologue. And it's not a pretty sight, but it is something that you have to have the willingness to do, because if the actor can accomplish it with a look, why would you want to burden the audience with all those words? You know what I mean? So.
I have a business side question for you. So we talk a lot about the cast and crew and influences that they have on character development, but we know ratings drive success for continued seasons. Can you talk about what external influences you have on your characters, if you have external influences that you must listen to, whether it be network or whether it be reviews? What type of external influences do you find you have when writing characters, and how does that affect your development of these characters?
Well, as I said, there are a lot of people who have a lot invested. The network executive who said, yes, we're going to give Tom Fontana X millions of dollars to make this series, has a big responsibility. He or she will get fired if I screw up. So I'm not one of these. I'm not a showrunner who goes, oh, the network, oh, the notes. I listen, again, respectfully, and I always try to be open to their notes. Some network executives, just so happens that Gary Levine, who's the president of Showtime, who we've been doing City on a Hill with, he and I did theater together at Williamstown 50 years ago. So he and I have a shorthand that has really functioned well, and I know, and he doesn't give that many notes, and they're always really smart notes. Not that I always do them, but then you get some network and studio executives who just give a note to prove, to validate their existence, and they're usually the most. I mean, a lot of the notes you get are whatever the movie that opened that weekend did. You get a note like, I think if you get a huge hammer. I'm beating up Marvel, but you know what I'm saying. They're like fish. They only have, the brain only exists for a certain short amount of time, and then they go from hungry to not hungry to hungry to not hungry. So you have to sort of, like some of the network executives and studio executives, you still have to treat them well, because you don't want to say that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. So you say, well, I'll try it, but nobody says to me, you have to do that, which only comes from doing it for 42 years, It wasn't like that in the beginning.
And going from external to kind of internal, as actors, we are our products, right? You are your product, which can make it very personal, what your reviews are. So I'm curious, as an actor, how much do you read about your performances and trades and reviews? And I guess, how do you stay mentally healthy when you're basically reading about your product, which is yourself?
I, until this year, read reviews, and I'd never been part of something where everything I've always done has always been at least all right. And then last year, I did a horror movie that is a firm, like, pure one-star movie. As pure as you can get, like garbage. And I put my heart into it. The actors around me, we were a really good team. We really worked hard, and it was crap. And I hadn't even seen the movie, but it had like a initial theater release in like Russia and like Eastern Europe or something. And the reviews came in, and one of the reviews said, "Mark Ryder's sniveling Harry is the worst character I've seen in any movie for some time." And I was like, oof. Oof. And it stung. No doubt, it really stung. You know, like everyone says, like you read 100 great comments and you read that one crap one. It's so true. Like, and I was like, oh. I was like, I realize now why people don't. You know, so now I try to stay away from them. And then, you know, so at moments of weakness, I'll like occasionally, you know. But I think staying healthy mentally in this. It's a very difficult industry, like the rejection that you're all going to face as you step forward. It's hard. So I think, I think you need to have a core group. That's what a lot of people say, and you have to have opinions that you can rely on, and not some dude on the internet who's like, you know, but he affects you so much, so you have to stay away from him. And you have to stay, you know, the people who can honestly critique your work, and you need to find those people, and you want them to be honest with you too. Like, I think it's important that we're honest with each other in this industry, because there's no point us all being like, yeah, you're great. You know, if it's someone I love and trust and they're telling me that, like, I don't want to know. I want to know the truth with it. So
I think it's also important to point out that what the hard, to me, one of the hardest things about being an actor is filling the in-between time, because you don't work all the time.
yeah.
And I think it's admirable that you are always doing something that isn't, I mean, you do the writing, but you do things that are not related to the business. Like right now you're studying, what are you studying? Jiu-jitsu. No, and you do yoga.
Yeah, volunteering.
Yeah, you do volunteering stuff. You volunteered with a suicide center. I just think it's important that all of us who want to try to create have a full life that isn't just focused on the business, because the business, you know, the thing about the business is that the business will tell you you're wonderful, and if you believe them, then you have to believe them when they tell you you suck. And they will tell you you suck. That is inevitable. And so I think that's why it's important to own your own life, as opposed to rely on reviews or the opinions of of people you don't know, and to have, as you said, that core group of people that you do trust.
But I also think, like, really seeing, like, particularly acting, it's a craft that we have to work on, and it's one of those things, like, Roger Federer became a great tennis player because he played non-stop. Like, why is it that concert pianists play like 10 hours a day and then they get good? But we have this idea about acting that you just show up and you're good, you know, and you're just a natural, you're just born with it. But I really don't believe that. And it's like, when you're working on your craft and understanding what acting is, there's so much joy and fulfillment in that it's rare that you get that when you're going and doing your one line on CSI, you know? So there's so much to be, I feel like if we put our weight into that, into becoming like masters of our craft, so much joy and fulfillment, whereas if I focus on the industry and the kind of like the yeses and nos, like, nah, you're done. You know, you can't live there. Yeah, I just don't think that's a life. So.
And mastering your craft, I mean, you spend, as a writer, I know you get up every morning and you write
5 o'clock.
How many hours do you write every morning?
Well, it depends what I'm working on, but there are days when I write 12 hours.
So that's, you know, you spend a lot of time in isolation.
Yes.
And just as, you know, actors are the product which can affect mental health, also spending a lot of time in isolation just with yourself writing.
Well, I'll tell you, it worked out really well for me during the pandemic. So there was an upside to it. No, I mean, you know, the great joy of writing, as with acting, I assume, is you do get lost in it, and I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I start work, and sometimes I'll look at the clock, and it'll be 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I will go, how is that possible? But I just think when you get into it, you know, I don't see it being alone as being a negative. Being lonely, I could see people being lonely being a negative, but being alone to me is when it's productive is a joy. You know, in the same joy that I have with being with people.
Sure.
You know.
I'm going to ask Andy to bring me a handheld mic, and let's now spend some time taking their questions, because I'm sure they have a lot more better questions than I do.
Put up the lights?
I'll grab, Andy, can you bring up the lights just a little bit in the audience? And I'll get a handheld mic, and I'll come to you, and I'd like you to speak into the mic so that everybody can hear what it is that you're asking. Let me grab a mic, and then I'll come grab some of your questions. Thanks. I'll start right here in the back with Carol.
How do you come up with the titles, and how long does that take? And do you do that before or after, or when does that come to you?
You mean titles for the series overall? Yeah, I think they come pretty quickly. You know, yeah, I'm just going through the list in my head. The toughest one was Borgia, because I mean, how did that name come about? I don't know. Yeah, they're very quick. I can't even. It's like a reflex. You know, you go like, oh, this is Oz.
Hi. So my question is for both of you about how writing a historical-based show, film, how important is it to give it its historical context of people's feeling towards it at the time, like in Borgia, where there's a huge strength in family, but also a modern-day view of it. How do you find that balance in it when writing a historical show?
I'll answer first, only because while we were, after we finished the scripts for season 2 of City on a Hill, which is set in the 1960s, George Floyd was murdered, and we, all the writers got together, and we wanted to go through all the scripts and look at it with a modern point of view, a very, very of-the-moment point of view. But the trick was we couldn't use any of the language of Black Lives Matter, because they would not have had that language in the 1960s. So the writing of it got, you know, we would try to be as precise as we could be to acknowledge what was going on at the time that we were filming the show, without it sounding like we were suddenly, these people were talking in a way that they wouldn't have the knowledge of. So those kinds of things are tough, you know, because the people who lived in those periods with those attitudes. And you can't make them be something that they weren't, just to make it, you know, acceptable now, you know. it's tricky. It's a tricky part of writing. The good side of writing a period piece is there are no cell phones. And I mean, just imagine the difference between you want to write a scene where a guy wants to tell the woman he loves that he loves her. I love you. Little emoji. Okay. In Cesare's time, he had to get on a horse in a rainstorm, ride through the countryside, get to the castle door, pound on the castle door, say, I love you, I love you, I love you. Now, I'd rather watch that scene than an emoji.
Yeah, I think from an acting perspective, it's just not getting caught in the trap of being like old, you know, like being like people. I'm sure they like had normal conversations and had same feelings as we have, but all of a sudden it goes period, and we all feel we have to like stand like this, and we don't. Like we can still find real relaxation in those like postures even, and that's the only way I can think to make that contemporary. But I feel like we all get caught in the trap of, you know, just making it old. But we've seen that, so.
I know you said you'd been shooting in Europe at some point, and I wanted to know the differences between, you know, foreign production companies and foreign productions as opposed to American productions. Like, what's the difference in? Is there a difference in routine and attitude? Do you get different notes?
I mean, the good thing about shooting in America is that we have unions that protect the workers. In Europe, they have sort of unions that don't seem to really be very focused on the workers.
I think you guys are a better like well-oiled machine.
Yeah.
Whereas the Europeans feel a little bit more like.
Well, I'll tell you, my first day on the set when we were shooting Borgia in Prague, we finished the scene and we were ready to move to the next location in the same building, and when it was time to move, everybody just started grabbing things. Like the stand-in was grabbing the light, you know, and I was like, well, I was so confused because and in a way it was like, oh, we're all working together to do this, but it was chaos because nobody had an assigned. Nobody seemed to. People just grabbed things and moved, and so it took more time than it would have if you just said, no, the light crew moves the lighting, and the sound crew moves the sound, and the props move the props. But in terms of the great thing about working, Borgia was French. The money came from the French, and the great thing about the French is they take August off, and so I didn't hear from them every year in August, and so we just kept shooting, and it was kind of wonderful not to get any notes.
So I have a question for both of you. For Tom, when you're hiring or like recruiting writers, what do you look for like in their writing that you want to work with them? And then Mark, when you receive a script, what's like a script that makes you like really excited to work on the project? Like, what do you like in a script?
Well, I will say this: I will hire writers from sort of any genre. A lot of agents will tell writers, you know, write a spec script for whatever the current hit TV show is, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I would rather read something a writer wrote because they couldn't not write it. Do you know what I mean? Where it was so much a part of them, their soul. That's what I want to read. Because to know that you can write an episode of Modern Family or something is fine, but because that's the craft of television. But I want people who bleed to work with me.
Yeah, I just feel like those scripts that are written from that personal place, that the writer does bleed, and it costs them almost in a good way, like not in like a suffering way. It's just there's something that just jumps off the page. Again, I just can't quite quantify it. Like why is the seagull so good? Like why is Glass Menagerie? Like why are those characters? I don't know what the quality is, but I just get the sense that the writer like put their heart on the page, and then I want to share, and I want to act those words out. It excites me.
Hello, my question's for Mark. Have you ever done any shadowing in your character development, like ride along with the priest or hang out with the priest, or have you done any shadowing in your character development? And how did you go about doing it?
Shadowing?
You know, because you were playing a cop, you go on a ride with cops and stuff like that.
You know, not really, honestly. I wish I had a cooler answer. Let me think. I don't know. I want to talk to. I want to talk to people that know more about it than I do, and get the feeling of it. But I would love to, if I got a certain character, to be able to spend time, like 6 months researching and living amongst them. Like that would be the dream, but I haven't had that opportunity.
Thank you.
This one's for Tom. I just was wondering, like, what do you think would be like the easiest things that you should avoid to like write into a character, like the easiest mistakes to make in writing a character?
I probably made them all too, so it's trying to like think. For me, it's when you're creating a character and you're creating the world that character lives in. There are certain kind of rules that you would invent, and I think it's important that you stick by those rules. There's a lot of screenwriters who, when they paint themselves into a corner story-wise, this character suddenly develops a skill that they've never possessed before. To get them out of it, I think there are moments that you feel like a writer's moment, like the writer I'm really being inarticulate here. When you feel that the writer has written this moment, you've done it wrong. Does that make any sense at all?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If it's not the character doing it, if it's forced by the writer to pushing that character there to go there, then I think it's a mistake.
Hello, Ron Hicks, Buffalo State alumni. I've studied under both Jeff and Aaron. I have two questions. The first, what do you think of the current state of Hollywood? Because when I came back to school, a lot of people said that there was no imagination. That's why they're buying up things that already have a fan base. My second question to Mark. I can picture you as two classic characters. King Arthur from the Excalibur version, and Robin Hood. Now, I'll let you both answer, but I would like to know, number one, and number two, who would you pick to play if the call ever came?
Sorry, the question is between those two, which one I want?
Yes, who?
Well, you look great in tights.
I think I do King Arthur, yeah.
To answer your other question, there's a reason that I live 3,000 miles from the epicenter of show business. I live in New York City. I find, and this is now I'm going to do this.
Well, put your feet in it, or what's it?
I just find Los Angeles just not a place that I could function creatively in. I think that, Dorothy Parker, the great wit, once was a screenwriter in Hollywood, and she said the dirtiest word in Hollywood is another. Let's make another. Because they love sequels, and it takes no imagination to say, let's do another Thor. You know what I mean? It takes no imagination. And they could probably program a computer. AI could probably write the screenplay as well as any of us, because it's just by the numbers. It's paint by the numbers. Whereas I think that there are opportunities now with streaming and cable still to a certain extent that will allow people to go in a direction that we've not seen. Barry Levinson, who's my business partner, his son is Sam Levinson. He created Euphoria, and I mean that's a show that you say how wonderful that somebody let him do that show, and that's because of streaming, because they need content. The best thing is they need us. They need stories. They need storytellers. So, rather than when you have an opportunity to pitch, and this is really the worst advice I could ever give you, when you go in for a pitch, rather than pitch a version of the big hit, pitch something that is so unique to you, and let that be. I mean, I pitched Oz to the 3 broadcast networks, and I'm lucky I got out of the rooms alive, because they just hated it. They want. I mean, it was brutal. And then HBO, which had never done a drama series before, was looking for a drama series, and a friend of mine said, you should talk to them about your prison show, because I think they're stupid enough to do it. And thank God they were stupid.
And I think it's so important to highlight that you created drama for HBO. There would be no Game of Thrones today if there was no Oz when you created Oz.
I would love to believe that, but I think somebody would have come along if I hadn't. But I did feel an enormous sense of responsibility being the first person to do a drama series for HBO, because they so trusted me. They so let me make the show I wanted to make. I think in 6 years I got 3 notes the entire time, and I felt a great responsibility to all the writers who would be coming after me, because all I could think of was, if I screw this up, the next guy, let's say David Chase, walks in and pitches Sopranos to Chris Albrecht, who ran the network, and he says, now, Tom Fontana fucked me over, I'm not going to let you fuck me over too. So that's the weight that I felt. I cannot even remotely take responsibility for all of the great shows like Sopranos and that came after Oz, but I do feel a little like I helped push it along.
Hello. So, kind of along the same line of questioning, as a creator and producer on Oz and Borgia, in terms of pitching the shows to executives, what was your do you have any advice or experiences with that?
Well, I'll give you one little thing, which is your first episode has to have a fuck me moment. And what do I mean by a fuck me moment? I mean The audience has to be watching the show and go, did you fucking see that? Because that's what engages us when we see a new series. That moment in a first episode. Now, in Oz, it was when good old Vern Schillinger tattooed the swastika on the ass of poor Tobias Beecher. Yeah, it was a hilarious moment. That was the holy shit moment. And every first episode, and it doesn't have to be violent, and it doesn't. I mean, you take the first episode of Sopranos. He's talking to ducks. He's talking about the ducks or the geese, whatever they were in the pond behind the house. He's a mob guy. He kills people, and he's talking about the ducks. I mean, that, you know, or the first episode of House of Cards, the American version. He's talking to the camera, and he's walking down the street, and there's a dog and the dog is hurt, and you go like, oh, the dog's hurt, and you think he's going to help the dog, and he breaks the dog's neck, and you go, well, wait a minute, is that helping? Is he putting the dog out of his misery, or is he just a sadistic asshole? Which is what, of course, he turned out to be. But you were engaged by that moment. You went, who is this guy? That's, I guess, what I'm saying. You want the audience the first time to go, who are these people?
So my question is for both of you. COVID brought the entertainment industry to a halt. I'm just curious as to your approach for a project before COVID and now, how you saw the industry change its approach to projects and how you see the industry going forward now that we've kind of come to a more open and easier to produce kind of industry.
We shot the second and third seasons of City on a Hill during the pandemic, and we had incredibly strict protocols. And my concern as the showrunner was, how do I keep everyone healthy and still protect them creatively? Because it's much harder to do a love scene when you're wearing a mask and a plastic shield or whatever those things are, and it's just it gets in the way of how two actors work together. So that was really, really tough. And I will say that the least amount of fun I've had in my career were those 2 seasons of City on a Hill, because it was tough. And I actually had to shut down production. I made the choice to shut down. That was right when COVID really first started. You know, we got hit so hard in New York City. And that was hard. It's hard to say to people, go home and stop earning a living and we'll hopefully come back and do this again. What we're doing this. I wrote a drama series for Audible, and we're in the process of recording it. Mark's playing one of the characters, and the SAG rules are still in place
until Friday.
Until Friday, until the day we finish. Then the SAG rules are gone. But we're sitting there with masks on, and I mean not the actors, because they have to be able to talk, and we have to get tested, and it's like it was, you know, a year ago. I hope it's over.
So when you start writing a character, how much do you actually know about them? Like, do you think, oh, they look like this, or they act like a certain way? What is the kind of questions you ask yourself?
Well, I'll tell you what I do is and it doesn't, it's never carved in stone, but what I do, and I'm going to stand up for this. What I do is I start with, okay, how do they think? How are they educated? How much education did they get? How do they reason? You know, how does the brain function? And then it's the heart. What makes them laugh what makes them cry, who do they love, okay? And then it goes a little lower. And then it's like, who do they want to sleep with, and what is the passion that they bring to it? And I think if you think about all those things as you're creating a character, you'll at least have it. You don't necessarily going to have to live with it forever, but you have some sense of all of the pieces of a human being, or does that make?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Hello. So this question is open to both of you guys. So the past few semesters I've been here, I've been learning a lot just through the professors and interacting with other students and just working on films. And I find my process continually changing no matter, for each activity I do. So I was wondering if there has been something that's happened to you guys that has dramatically changed your process or subverted your expectations when you thought you were ready for something, and how did you guys approach that?
I'm going to let you answer.
Until I was 26, I barely did any work. I'm gonna be honest. But sometimes maybe that's not a bad strategy because you're running on your impulse and your instincts. And in my youth, I was really tapped into that. And then I started to learn that if I want to really have a super long career, I need to create a process, I think, to be able to reach some certain characters. Otherwise I'm just pretending and performing. And so then I started with the method. So it's a lot of Stanislavski and Strasberg stuff, relaxation, sensory, animal work. I don't do it every time, but sometimes I'll feel for a character, let's use that. And so this process is always evolving, but you're gathering tools to use for each individual project. And there's a comedy movie I did a couple of years ago. I used 0 tools. I went in and I had fun. And it was great, and it was a wonderful experience. Other times it's okay, for this, I'm gonna really need to be connected down here, so I'm gonna be working a lot on my breath, and just varies from each one. And I think it's gonna continue doing that. I don't, nor do I want to get stuck in one method, and I think that can be detrimental too. There's also something to be said about we overthink these things so much that we're bogged down in technique. And then I'm sure from a writing perspective too, sometimes you just gotta lay it down with your heart and so that's what I'd say, the process. But I think it's important to have tools to fall back on, because we are going to encounter situations over and over and over where it's going to be difficult to do our work, and we have to find our way in. From a writing perspective, had the pleasure of working with him on script, and one of his really great abilities that I saw is that he manages to get into that flow where he's writing from that deep place where he's creative, boom, boom. How often are we sitting there and we're oh, line, no, and we get nowhere. Same from an acting place, you can get stuck but how can I access that, where I'm creative? I don't know if that's a right brain, left brain thing, or do people talk about that, but getting into that flow and constantly learning techniques to get you there, and a process. And this man has processes for everything, but that's to get him into that flow state. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd say.
So Tom, you've created a character and somebody who never existed before, and it's now on paper in front of you, and you hired the actor. How much of that do you share with the actor, or do you ask the actor to come back to you with who they think the character is?
Well, initially, I don't reveal very much.
Okay.
In between seasons, before I'm going to start working on the new season, I will meet with the lead actors, and I will say, what song haven't you sung? What dance haven't you danced? What? Because the danger with episodic television you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. So it's important to invite the actor to say, you know, I think it would really be great if my character did X. And I'll give you an example. Rita Moreno, when between the first and second seasons of Oz, I had a meeting with her, and I said, okay, you know, what do you think? Where could we play around with this character? And she said, oh, I think it would be wonderful if I had an attraction to one of the prisoners. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. It's a good idea. Season 2, nothing. Season 3, nothing. Season 4, I cast Chris Maloney, and I had Sister Peter Marie fall in love with Chris Maloney's character. And she read the script and she came to me and she goes, I meant like an old man. I'm terrified of this scene. So, and she also said, I thought you were just like, you know, pretending that you were going to listen. And I was like, no, I was just waiting for the right moment. Because, you know, you just, sometimes you go, I have A and I need B. I got to wait for B to come.
When you're working on something like Borgia, you have a very unique physical environment. So for you, Tom, you said you don't like to include a lot of exposition. How do you approach writing knowing that you're going to have those very unique environments? And for you, Mark, when you're in those environments, does just being in that space change how you approach things? I know you said you don't want to stiffen up or anything, but does the environment inform your approach?
Well, you know, I think for me, like I said, because I know I'm going to have conversations with the art director, the costume designer, the director, I can talk about the environment historically. But again, you don't want to get set in your ways because you're going to end up at a location that is nothing like what the real place would look like. So, you know, you want to have the knowledge to answer the questions, and then you want to have the ability to say, okay, that's we don't need to do it that way. You know?
Yeah, I think like the costumes and that environment helps so much. Like even, you know, I don't know how to stand while I'm wearing a sword, you know, in daily life, but then all of a sudden I'm there, I've got this, so I'll like use it, you know. So you just, yeah, I think that's why a lot of actors like struggle in auditions, because you're here in front of a camera, but then come to life when you're in that world, and then it's all just about getting lost in it as much as you can. And that's, as I've said, one of the most joyous things is to be like able to recreate that, to exist in that world like you'd never get to. So yeah.
Hello, my question has to deal with the writing. You mentioned about the environment of what you're creating, but what about your own environment to make you creative? As far as, do you have like a special room where you write in, or a special process? How do you go about that process to be the most creative as you can?
Yeah, I do. I have a place in my home with a desk, and I still write on yellow legal pads. I don't work on a computer, and it, you know, obviously, like being here, I'm staying in a hotel, and I need a desk. I don't need my desk, but I need a desk with a certain amount of light, because at 5 o'clock it's dark.
Does stuff ever come to you like when you're driving in a car?
Always, yes. In the shower is the greatest place of inspiration. But I'll tell you this thing which developed over the years. I just before I go to bed, I think about the first scene I have to write in the morning, and sometimes that's the last dream I have. So I literally I have to run to the desk to write something down before I forget it. But it is kind of extraordinary when it happens, because you like go, oh, and then you're off, you know.
Thank you.
First things first, I want to express a lot of gratitude for you guys coming out here. I'm so fucking thrilled for y'all to be here. I learned so much. It was great.
I'm paying $50 to see.
Yeah, and I mean, I was amazed how much I feel like I connected with y'all. Like we have a lot in common. Like Tom, we're from the west side of Buffalo and went to Canisius High School, and Mark, we're both human beings who just so happen to be 32 years old. Yeah, I'm like the oldest dude in my classes, and I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but I do love the class. I do love the craft, and I was wondering, I'm just very interested to know what was y'all's biggest fuck up while developing your craft, and how did y'all unfuck that fuck up?
Wow, first off.
I'd say the self-flagellation that comes from being an artist, I used to do takes and I'd come out of it and be like, fuck, I literally remember I'm going, what the fuck, And it's I really think that's so unartistic now.
Mm-hmm.
So this punishing of ourselves if we don't do something well enough, or we feel that to me is the big fuck up. And it'll still happen to me occasionally when if there's just a complete collapse, it'd be fuck, I'm the worst human being ever. But learning to overcome I'm not gonna punish myself for my art anymore, and I think stepping past that is, I don't know if that's really a fuck up, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm just trying to wade through all of them. Biggest one. I may have to get back to you on this. Sorry. Coming up.
Tom, I think that in describing the creation of characters, you seem to be describing the beginnings of your series, that some of your shows all of your shows run for years. And so people know the characters and actors get to know the characters, but people also know the shows, the plots. And as you were talking, I was thinking of Betty Buckley goes everywhere telling people, you didn't tell her character, she says she created the character herself and brought it to you. Is that a lie?
Well, Betty is a dear friend, and I would not contradict her.
Where did that character come
from? How's that for diplomacy? Yeah, I'm not going to contradict it. It's funny, at the event last night, they interviewed Lee Tergesen for this clip reel, and Lee Tergesen said to me at one point, I remember when I came to you to talk and tell you I had this idea for this character that to buy a speech, and I was into this whole thing, and I'm like, oh, okay. And then he found out that I had created the character 5 years before he and I had that conversation, and he said, why didn't you tell me that I was wrong? And I said, well, it seemed more important to you than it did to me. So if it's important to Betty, I give it to Betty. But I'm going to call her.
We're so thankful to have you back, and thank you for coming along, Mark. We're going to have to wrap in a second, but before we applaud and wrap, I'm wondering if we can just do one selfie of us with this entire awesome audience. So if we come to the edge here, I think this will work. I've already studied this.
Should we get everybody to move down?
Yeah, can you guys come closer? We'll come closer. I know it's going to be a lot of movement. You don't have to move if you're uncomfortable. Only if you want. Gather as close as you can. Here's our frame. Let's go on 3. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's give